Chapter 18, Euphoria and Despair. "That dinner was fantastic," exclaimed Ari, wiping his mouth with his napkin and pushing his chair back from the table. He stood up and reached for Nicole's plate. "Here, let me help you." "Sit right back down," she ordered, then added with an impish look, "I've got a surprise for you." "Shall I close my eyes?" "If you like." She went to the refrigerator and brought out a Black Forest torte, his favorite. Cutting a huge piece, she placed it in front of Ari and sat down with a dazzling smile. "You're not having any?" "No, I'm watching my diet." "Since when?" "A few weeks ago. Just something I decided while you were away." "You made this just for me? What's the special occasion?" "Just a welcome home to let you know how much I missed you. A week late, but I didn't have time to bake it until today." "You shouldn't have," exclaimed Ari. "Well, then don't eat it." Very funny. He was already digging in. Wonderful." When the last crumb had been pursued and swallowed, Ari leaned back and sighed with satisfaction. "Nikki, you're so thoughtful, always doing something special for me. In spite of your hectic life as a doctor, where would I ever find another woman like you?" "You'd better not be looking." Ari reached out and seized Nicole's hands. "How about a walk? I need it after that. Besides, it's a gorgeous evening." "Great, I'll get my joggers on." Once outside and away from the ever-present danger of bugging devices in walls and autos, Ari confided, "I've got a special assignment for you tomorrow afternoon. I hope you don't have something at the hospital." "I'm off after 3 o'clock. What is it?" "You bought a black handbag at Galeries Lafayette yesterday." "Yes." "If you have anything in it, empty it out tonight. Don't take it to work. When you come home, put nothing in it. I'll have it filled with some very important papers, the same ones I put in that special place you know about, in case something happens to me." "This sounds so mysterious. What's going on?" "You're going to deliver the papers to an American. Used to be a student of mine years ago, when her father was a pastor in Paris. Her name's Carla Bertelli. She's a freelance reporter now for the Washington Post and the Wall Street Journal, with connections at the New York Times." Impressive. Where do I find her?" "Meet me at Café du Bois at 7 o'clock. Bring the bag. My contact will come along about 7:30 and just happen to recognize me. She'll come over and join us. You'll have put your bag down on the pavement beside you, on the right. I'll be on your left, okay? She'll have a black one exactly like yours. She'll sit next to you and put her bag down beside yours. When she leaves, she'll take yours with the papers in it." "How did you arrange this?" "I just happened to see a write-up in Le Monde about a convention of freelance writers and suspected she might be there. I got in touch with her through a courier. Later we talked on the phone. It's all set." They were walking past one of their favorite sidewalk cafes in the Latin Quarter. "Look," said Ari, "there's an empty table. Let's grab it." "2 espressos," he called to the waiter. They sat in silence, sipping their coffee and enjoying the endless parade of fascinating humanity hurrying past. "You've had something on your mind, Nikki," said Ari at last. "I've noticed it, ever since I got back from Eastern Europe." "What is it?" Nicole hesitated. Oh, darling." She reached out for Ari's hand as she struggled to keep her voice steady. "I've been waiting for the right time to tell you. We're going to have a baby." She was too excited to notice the shocked look on his face. "I know we weren't planning anything like this, but since it happened, isn't it too wonderful? I found out just after you left." Ari put his hands over his eyes in an agony of disbelief. When finally he looked at her, there was no mistaking his displeasure. But how could he communicate it tactfully to the deliriously happy girl beside him? "But, darling," he began seriously. Nikki's smile faltered and died. "Look, we need to talk about this. It takes two. I mean, this just isn't the right time. Maybe later." How could he get across to her that this must not be? "Darling, a little later it would be wonderful. But right now, it's impossible. Eastern Europe is about to break wide open." Somehow it hadn't come out the way he'd intended. The expression on Nicole's face told him he had bungled badly. Eastern Europe? She managed. I don't see the connection. That's reaching awfully far for an excuse. It's the timing, he stammered. So much is going to happen in the next few months. I'll need your support more than ever. There he went, putting his foot in his mouth again. How could he say it? But, darling, responded Nicole softly, a tremor in her voice, as for timing, it's almost too late for you already, you know. I wasn't going to say that. Right now is just the worst time possible. He reached out for her, but she pulled her hands away. I love you, darling. So it just isn't convenient for you. I didn't exactly mean that. I have a career too, you know, but I wouldn't let that stand in the way of something so important, something that ought to mean so much to both of us. It would mean a lot to me if we'd planned it. Are you telling me to get an abortion? Is that what you want? Nicole's eyes were accusing him. Ari avoided looking at her as he carefully chose his words. As a matter of fact, yes. He was trying to be calm, eminently rational. Let's be reasonable about this, Nicky, and not get swept away with emotion. Too much is at stake. The world is at a pivotal point. Even as he said it, Ari sensed that Nicky was on another track. He winced at what he knew would be her response. I don't believe what I'm hearing. Out to save the world, the environment, the plants, animals, and all of mankind. And you want to kill our baby? Nicky, listen to reason. We're not talking about a child. Not at this stage, anyway. Nicole stood to her feet uncertainly, her eyes blurred with tears. Desperately, Ari jumped up and grabbed her arm. Please, Nicky, let's talk it over, he pleaded. I think we've talked enough. I understand perfectly. She pulled herself free, ran across the street, and disappeared among the crowd. Stunned and drained, Ari looked longingly and helplessly at the spot where he had last seen her. Ari sank back at last into his chair. Looking around in embarrassment, he motioned for the waiter to bring the bill. Nicole would calm down. It would take time, but when she got back to the apartment, they'd get it all sorted out. She was a realist. It would be a hard decision, but she'd see that it wasn't convenient. Some other time, but not now. After her hurried departure, Nicole soon changed to a slower pace. They'd never had a fight. Nothing like this in all the years they'd lived together. How could he, the father, the man she loved so much, even think for one moment of an abortion? This was their child. Of course she'd calm down, go back to him, but not yet. She needed space, time to think. Aimlessly, she wandered along the streets toward the Seine. From the sheltering maze of the Latin Quarter's narrow lanes, she came out at last to traverse the left bank of the river and the ancient Ile de la Cité along Boulevard du Palais, then across the other arm of the Seine. There were so many memories to sort through, the bitter and the sweet. Until tonight, she'd found her only security, her only link to unconditional love and acceptance in Ari. Now she must face a reality with no options. Did Ari's love have a price tag? One that she couldn't pay? That had never seemed possible. In despair, she sobbed aloud. At that moment, a voice intruded on her consciousness. You can't explain the life that develops in the womb as a mere physical conjunction of sperm and ovum. Nicole's mind reeled under the impact of the words. No, the incredible development of bones and nerves and brain and the trillions of cells in their intricate organization are all too marvelous to be explained by chance. She had awakened as from a deadly sleep. Tearing her gaze from the sidewalk and daring to look up, she saw before her, at Tour Saint-Jacques, a small, attentive crowd gathered around someone whom she could hear but not see. Edging closer, wiping her eyes, she strained now to catch every word as the speaker continued. That fact alone should be enough to prove that we're not the product of random evolutionary forces, but of a blueprint so ingenious that only God himself could be its designer. There's much more involved than incomprehensible mechanical genius. Each of us is more than a highly organized conglomeration of cells. You can't account for the human personality, the qualities of love and hate, the aesthetic appreciation of music and art, the recognition of truth and justice, of right and wrong in terms of protein molecules and chemical reactions. These are spiritual qualities, totally unexplainable in relation to the material composition of our bodies, which itself is marvelous beyond comprehension. Nicole sensed the communication of an unusual calm and confidence as she listened. She was captivated by the logic and quiet power of the compassionate yet firm voice. At the same time, however, she felt herself repelled. Someone was trying to convince this crowd that God existed. How could he dare, in Paris of all places? She knew that the overwhelming majority of Parisians like herself were too intellectually arrogant to believe in God. It was unthinkable to any uneducated person in the 20th century, intolerable, to be accountable to some creator. Torn between the common-sense power of what was being said and her reluctance to accept it, she began to move away. You'll never know why you're here on this planet until you know your Creator. If you miss His purpose for your existence, you'll be forever frustrated and empty no matter what you try in your search for fulfillment. The words faded as she quickened her pace, strangely fearful of what more she might hear. "Excuse me." Startled by the voice just behind her, Nicole turned to see a woman of about her own age hurrying to catch up with her. "I couldn't help noticing. You've been crying. May I help?" There was a winsome tenderness about her that was immediately attractive. "It's kind of you." The empathetic eyes encouraged Nicole to continue. I just had a quarrel with my fiancé. Is there anything I can do?" Nicole shook her head, feeling foolish for having said anything. "No, thanks. I'll be okay." "You're Dr. Lalonde, aren't you?" "How did you know?" Nicole asked in surprise. "I've seen you at the hospital." Nicole looked at her more closely. "I've seen you there, too. You're a nurse?" She nodded. "Yes, I'm Françoise Duclos." "Of course. Your husband is Dr. Pierre Duclos, Chief of Staff. Is he the one who's speaking back there?" "Yes, we come here quite often." "I thought there was something familiar about that voice." "If Pierre and I can help in any way," persisted Françoise. "What your husband was saying about life forming in the womb," Nicole hesitated. "That caught my attention." "You're pregnant?" Nicole nodded. 2.5 months. I needed someone to talk to. She started to break down and caught herself. "I've admired your husband." "Your fiancé isn't happy about the pregnancy?" asked Françoise gently. "Wants an abortion, perhaps?" Nicole steeled herself. "I'd rather not talk about it." She took a half-hearted step to leave. "It was nice meeting you." "Can you believe it was only a coincidence that you came along just at the time when my husband was speaking about what concerned you so much at this very moment?" Françoise's voice was tender but compelling. Nicole found herself suddenly overcome with emotion, unable to answer. "Coincidence? Maybe, maybe not." "Do you remember what he was saying?" continued Françoise gently. "I shall never forget," confessed Nicole, barely managing to hold her voice steady. "No, I think it was not a coincidence. You're as persuasive as your husband." She held herself together with great effort. "I do need someone to talk to," she added, dabbing at her eyes. Françoise put her arm compassionately around Nicole and guided her toward a nearby bench. "Then why don't we just sit down over here and you tell me what's on your heart? I'm a good listener."